We're live.
All righty. Okay. Well, hello to everyone joining us. I'm Ismael Herrera with AARP in San Antonio. Thank you for joining us today. I want to welcome you to this important discussion about housing stability here in San Antonio. AARP is a nonprofit, nonpartisan member organization that has been working to promote the health and well-being of older adults for more than 60 years. Today, we'll discuss housing challenges faced by older adults. We will take a particularly close look at how city code compliance and other local policies affect older adults and their families. We will also talk about how other cities tackle this issue. Let's meet our panelists today. So to start, AARP Texas Volunteer State President, John Vasquez is a University of Texas Law School graduate who has worked as a bank accountant, legal services attorney, assistant Texas Attorney General, special counsel for the Texas State Auditor's Office, and as a private attorney. He was an Austin municipal judge between 1996 and 2015, as well as an adjunct professor at St. Edward's University in Austin, where he taught juvenile justice. Retired since 2015, Vasquez has been an active volunteer of AARP Texas and other community organizations. Thank you for joining us, Judge Vasquez. I think you're muted.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much for the introduction. And I look forward to this opportunity to talk about what is going to be a very important topic for older persons here in San Antonio who want to retain their housing and age in place.
Thank you. Terry Castillo is a lifelong generational resident of District 5, raised in and resident of the west side of San Antonio, a proud daughter and granddaughter of migrant farm workers. Castillo is a Burbank High School alumnus and holds a master's degree in history with a focus in urban policy from UTSA. The council member is a housing organizer, a historian of urban policy, has organized statewide for healthcare with Texas Organizing Project, and since 2019 has been an active member of the Historic Westside Neighborhood Association. She has worked in District 5 public schools for 6 years, and she was elected to the San Antonio City Council in June of 2021. Thank you for joining us, Councilwoman.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, and I look forward to the conversation.
Ms. Dianne Gibson is currently employed with the City of Dallas in the City Attorney's Office as the Community Courts Division Section Head, overseeing 5 community courts within the City of Dallas. Ms. Gibson has over 25 years of experience in working with the community to provide the general public with social services and housing. She is an experienced public relations and media professional who has developed programs throughout the community. Thank you for joining us, Ms. Gibson.
Thank you for having me.
All righty, well, we can get started and get down to one of the things that brought us together to talk a little bit with the councilwoman, and really one of our joint interests is housing, and particularly that of older adults, and housing stability in particular is what we're really our focus today. So Councilwoman Castillo, what we would like to start with today is talking a little bit about a recent University of Texas study that finds that San Antonio surpasses other large cities in issuing orders to vacate and demolish homes. This report also finds that the census tracts with the most orders to vacate are in the city's east side and west side, where where your city council district is nested. What is your reaction to this report? How does this go along with what you've already seen from the community, from your district, and San Antonio as a whole?
Yes, absolutely. What the UT Austin study does is corroborate the community's experience. For the last several years, the Historic Westside Residents Association in particular, had been receiving a large amount of these building and standard boards notices. And they started to increase, and we were receiving lots of these notices, and we noticed a pattern, right? And when we looked into the data through the Building and Standards Board, we saw a pattern. And I think it's important that when we talk about aging in place and community displacement, that community displacement and or gentrification aren't phenomenons that just occur on its own. Right, there's policy and tools in place that help facilitate displacement, that help facilitate gentrification. And when we look at the tools in the toolbox to displace residents with demolition and notices to vacate in particular, and the role of code compliance, we see that there are different ways here in San Antonio that our code compliance officers are funded. They're funded through the Community Development Block Grant, which has federal restrictions and dictates the ways in which and where they enforce city code. And we also have general funded code compliance officers that aren't restricted to specific census tracts. So when we look at these tools and we look at the pattern, and based off of conversations having with the Development Services Department, we learned that the Community Development Code officer funded by the CDBG fund was concentrated primarily within 78207, which is our city's, if not our state's, most economically poor zip code. So what this study did was corroborate the experiences of community members within District 5, within the 78207, who were feeling and experiencing an increase of code compliance violations. And what these violations look like, or start off as rather, is the grass is too tall, right? When you look at the property maintenance code, if it's over a foot, that's a code compliance violation. And it turns into outside placement, which means there's trash and or tires near the driveway. That's one example. But I think what's important when we talk about these property code, the property code in general and code enforcement, right? And when we look at the census tract 78207 and District 5 as a whole, we are one of the city's oldest neighborhoods. So we were constructed prior to zoning codes. And what that means is for many of our residents, we don't have garages, right? So we're going to stack our tires next to where we park our cars. We don't have a garage to hide, right? Or what we would typically go in a garage. And what we're seeing was a ripple effect. One code enforcement violation turns into another. But what we also need to look at is the demographics in that, right? This is where we have some of the city's oldest housing stock. We have high concentrations of poverty. And what that means, the cost of rehabbing one's home drastically outpaces wages, drastically outpaces what a senior who may be on a fixed income can afford to do. For example, I don't know who, I wouldn't be able to fix my roof within 1 month notice, right? You have to have resources to do that. And when we're looking at the demographics, folks on fixed incomes and folks dealing with a number of issues, whether it's increasing property taxes, house maintenance, medication, childcare, many of these costs add up. And when we look at the cost of a violation, there is a process in that there's notices that eventually lead to a citation. But we need to keep in mind that for folks like our seniors, they don't necessarily have the physical capacity to address the code compliance issue. For example, we have this one resident sharing his story with his permission, who, he's a disabled veteran, has had surgery for a hernia. So something as simple, what sounds as simple as moving a washer to the backyard is a huge physical task that he can't really take. So I think it's important that we have a larger conversation about the property maintenance code. And again, going back to the study, recognizing that there is a pattern. And when we look at past data, as you mentioned, it started in the East Side, right, which has now made it to a list of one of the fastest gentrifying neighborhoods in the nation, right? So we know there's a pattern in place that's making its way to the West Side. And when we follow the data, we see that there's opportunity to amend the code, the property code. But in addition to that, that's why our office hit the ground running and put forward a couple of budget amendments to mitigate this issue to ensure that folks can age in place. So what we requested was $1.5 million for a demolition mitigation pilot program. we were able to secure, with council support, $1 million for the program. It's now been refashioned as Operation Rebuild. So we look forward to helping homeowners rehab their homes. But in addition to that, there's opportunity to, one, amend the property maintenance code to where it's more, where folks don't have to, for example, if they have soda cans in the front because they're collecting those cans, that's not a violation. For many of my constituents, they're collecting those cans to pay their light bill. It's a source of income. So we need to ensure that we're amending the code to where it's not creating a burden to many of our residents. But in addition to that, the city also established an affordable housing team, and there was opportunity for us to create case managers within that team. But that was one of our amendments that failed. But there's opportunity moving forward and looking to models in Dallas that we can continue to ensure that we're creating a more just San Antonio, to where we're providing resources and assistance, that we're being proactive in connecting our residents to those resources. Again, San Antonio, we have several programs that exist that are fairly underfunded. For example, the Under One Roof, minor rehab programs. These are programs that help our residents come into code compliance. But when we look at the number of slots per district, the number of applications we receive drastically outnumbers the allotted slots that we have per district. So I think this city gives us an opportunity to take a step back and recalibrate to ensure that we can help our residents age in place if they want to.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Before we move along, I just want to remind those folks that are joining us through Zoom, or if some folks are starting to join us via our YouTube live stream, to feel free to enter your questions, to give us questions at the end of the conversation or at the end of the panel discussion. I will read out some of those questions so that we can possibly take some community questions as well. Judge Vasquez, with your experience as a former municipal judge, what kind of issues do older adults go through when navigating a code violation or something like tall grass or outside storage?
Well, first off, let me say that Councilmember Castillo did an excellent job of explaining the issues that we face in our communities and the problems that older adults who are homeowners are facing every time they have a notification from the city that they're in violation of some code issue. Now, let me lay the foundation here, because you may not understand it, but a code violation can be charged as a criminal case in municipal court. So these violations are not simply a civil notice to do something and then maybe we'll see you in court. These are criminal cases where if you do not appear in court, you can get a failure to appear charge filed against you and get a warrant issued for your arrest. So it can lead to a spiral downward that can affect your whole livelihood. And if you're older, that's going to be very difficult for you to have the arrest warrant, to have all those potential fines you're facing. And you're not going to have the money, most likely, to afford to hire an attorney to represent you. So these are issues that can place a huge burden and affect the lives of older persons. And we all know, based on research AARP has done and others have done, is that older Americans want to age in place. They want to live out their lives as much as possible where they live. They don't want to be moved somewhere else. They want to stay there in their neighborhood with their friends and family. And here in San Antonio, as the council member pointed out, you're looking at east side and west side issues. These are high poverty areas where we have higher incidence of individuals living in older homes, because these are the older parts of San Antonio. So what I would see in Austin, which is the newer city, is that you would have individuals charged. They would show up to court. Many times, unfortunately, they wouldn't. But when they did show up to court, they would then talk to a prosecutor and try to resolve their case. And if they couldn't, then they'd go to trial, although very few of them did that. Or they would just simply pay a fine, which they could ill afford. So what I was able to do as a judge is try to bring the prosecutor together when they worked out their deal and discuss with them what was happening. And then ask the prosecutor if they could let the person have a little more time to try to resolve it, and then see what could be done in order to get that individual the resources they needed to adjust the issue. So if it was high weeds, there are different volunteer organizations out there in Austin and here in San Antonio as well, which will go out there and provide that service. They'll mow the grass, they'll cut it down. If it's something like moving something around, they can help with that too. They have volunteers available to do that. So what you have to do is put that individual in contact with those organizations, and then you'll get the problem resolved. As a judge, I can't just dismiss a case. The prosecution has to make that motion to dismiss, but I can do something to try to get the case to a situation where that person is able to stay in their house and face as little consequence as possible. So with what we're talking about here, a problem-solving court, a community court, hopefully you have those issues more readily addressed through a system that is one that intends to try to, as the name implies, solve the problem. And by doing so, they bring the neighborhood up to where the neighbors would like to see it, but they also provide assistance and help or access to it to the person who is facing those charges, that building code violation or property code violation, so that they get the help they need and can stay there and not face exorbitant fines or warrants. So what I hope happens if these cases remain as cases charged in municipal court, that you have the access case managers there that can help those individuals who are charged get the help that they need to get into compliance and to avoid further penalties.
Thank you. Ms. Gibson, can you tell us a little bit about what you do and what exactly is a community court, and how does it work in the city of Dallas? Because I know it may range from city to city on how it works, but how does it work in your community? And I think you're muted.
Okay, thank you all so much. I have enjoyed everything. Thank you, Councilwoman Castillo. Anytime you want to come to Dallas, you are more than welcome. So you guys, here's what community court does. Community court is a Class C misdemeanor court. And the reason why it's called community court is because we are located within the communities. Every community we're located in, with the first three that's funded by, as the Councilwoman previously discussed, CDBG funding. So we have 3 community courts, and they're funded by that CDBG, Community Development Block Grant money. And so one of the requirements is that we have to be in a neighborhood where over 51% of those households fall below the poverty guideline. So we're in South Dallas, West Dallas, and in South Oak Cliff that meet that qualification. It's a Class C misdemeanor court. The good thing about community court, unlike any other court, we're housed in the community. In addition to that, we have community service coordinator. We have a social service coordinator, the clerk, the judge, and a prosecutor, and they're all housed in each court in that community. The most important part, before I go any further, is that we are totally supported by the mayor and the city council of Dallas and our city attorney, so that makes it even better. We started out with 1 community court back 17 years ago. June will be 18 years now, and we're now with 5 community courts throughout the city of Dallas. And we also have a night court that has been beneficial as well. So what community court does is, once a person, thanks to Dallas Police Department and the Code Department, because they're the ones that write the citation, and we deal with quality of life citations. So those are citations that deal with code violations. They also deal with public intoxication, those type quality of life crimes. Once you get a citation, the good news is, instead of the 21-day process, you actually get your court date at the time you get the citation. So say today is Tuesday and a DPD or code officer write a citation on Tuesday, there's a possibility you will be in court on Thursday. So it's called swift justice, where within 7 days of you getting that citation, there's not the possibility of you forgetting it, because he's going to give you, or she is going to give you, that date at the time of the citation when it's issued. They're going to tell you what court to go to. They're going to tell you where it is. And most of the time, the court that you're going to is the one closest to the one where you committed the crime. And so those are the court that's the court that you would go to. So once you enter community court, once you talk with the clerk, you enter a plea of guilty, no contest, or not guilty. Now, since we are a plea court, if it's not guilty, we will then have the clerk to give you a court date, and then you will go to 2014 Main Street to either have a court by jury or have a trial by court. So those are your two options if you're not guilty. Now, if you're guilty or no contest, you would then have the opportunity to talk with the prosecutor to officially enter your plea. Once you enter that plea, then you will talk with a caseworker. Everything that caseworker does is assessment driven. That means that we have a system, an ECM software system, where we will actually ask you several questions to find out what are some of the underlying problems. A lot of time people are sitting under a tree drinking a beer, not because that's what they want to do, but because if you've ever tried to get into government, you know how hard it is to get the help you need. And a lot of times people get disgusted, and so they just give up. Well, that case manager serves as an advocate for that individual. Once we find out, what are your underlying problems? Do you need housing? Do you need a job? Do you need Social Security? What is the problem? If it's a code violation, is it something that we can sign you up with the Tomorrow Fund? Can we find someone else? Now, here's the good news I have to tell you about community court, is that a lot of our defendants that come into the court give back to defendants in the court. One quick short story. We just had 2 weeks ago, young lady was in the court. She was just really upset because it looked like every time she made one step forward, she took 2 steps backwards. And she was saying that, and even trying to get to court, somebody had actually shot in through her windshield and just shattered the windshield in her car. So now she's trying to catch the bus to get to the court and everything. And she just really broke down and cried. It was a defendant there that was there for a code violation. And guess what he owned? He owned a car shop. And so when he saw her breaking down when she was leaving the court, he said, "Miss, is it possible for me to speak to her?" And I said, "Well, if she don't mind, I really don't." And I stood there to see what was going to happen. He gave her his card and told him, "You take this card to this shop and tell my son I sent you and get you a new windshield." Those are the kind of things that community court does. We have a contract worker that was there in court on a code violation. And guess what? We needed someone that needed a wheelchair ramp built. He built that wheelchair ramp for them. Community court is about not increasing the problem or not putting additional burdens on you, but try and help you with those burdens. And so once that caseworker does the full assessment and she decides this is somebody that needs their state issued ID, something we take for granted, mean the world to them. So we actually not only get you your state issued ID, but we pay for that state issued ID. Thanks because of a grant from another nonprofit, the Foundation for Community Empowerment gave us funding so we could help them get their ID, and we pay for that. Once we do that, if it's getting your ID, if it's getting housing, and we have a wonderful relationship with our housing department. So if it's housing, those are some recommendations that we will make to the prosecutor. So that caseworker will say to the prosecutor, Snuffy Smith, my favorite character, Snuffy Smith is in need of state issued ID. They need to find employment and they need stable housing. Well, once she make that recommendation to the prosecutor would then incorporate that as a part of their recommendation to the judge. So now that gives us a little more teeth to get the person to work with the court so that we can help them and then make sure that they're better than they are when they leave than they were when they came into the court. So once the prosecutor reviews the notes from the social worker, they will then make that recommendation to the judge that as a condition of their probation, they have to work with the case manager to get their state issued ID, to help them get housing, to help them either find employment or to find training, or if it's just getting their disability started, we'll help them with that. If it's getting their utility paid, getting their rent paid, getting their mortgage paid, we will help them with that. Sometimes it's just basic life skill classes. Also, it may be that they need housing. In addition to that, we will send them to code classes. Sometimes people don't do better because they don't know better. And so a lot of times those classes will help them understand most of our biggest problem is putting buck trash out. And so once you put your buck trash out, everybody has to know when the exact time to put that trash out. So not only do we help them with that, but we have another vision within the city of Dallas that they created with Sandra Bowie and her group that they actually now will give the HOA presidents signs so you can put out in your yard now to say, it's time to set out buck trash. So guess what? That helps our senior adults a whole lot, more than just doing the calendar, but we go that extra step to help them put the sign out. We also teach them as to why you can't put it out before and what trash is considered bulky trash. Those are some of the things that we do. So once that recommendation is given to the judge would then incorporate that as a condition of their probation. Here's the part I really love, is that in lieu of finding court costs, we get you to do community service. So again, that's not an additional financial burden on the person. You get to do community service. And here's the other part. You actually do the community service in the same neighborhood where you committed the crime. That's where you go back and do your community service. Now we know a lot of people are not able to do physical community service. So if you're unable to do that, a lot of times we'll have you to go to additional code classes, or you have to attend life skill classes. Or sometimes the prosecutor will tell you, write an essay why you won't put your trash on the curb too much anymore. So we have different things that we get you to do. And you know, every once in a while, not too often, if a person says, I just can't do any of that, and then we'll go back and make a recommendation to the prosecutor based on documentation. This is probably someone that's just not going to be able to do community service. And if that is the case, then that goes back to the judge, and the judge make the final decision on that. But whatever it is, we definitely don't want to add an additional hardship. Now, in the community service, once they go to the community service coordinator, now this is the good part. Another assessment is done. Why? Because we want to know what is your physical and mental ability. What can you do and what you can't do, because we don't want to have people doing something they just cannot do. So that's why they have to do an assessment at that level. Once they complete that assessment, we tell them what they need to wear and be dressed comfortable. So we do, you know, before the pandemic, we actually would go do house painting, and they love house painting. But because of the pandemic, we've had to put that on hold for a while. And we provide all the supplies. It's never unsupervised. We have a staff of 5 people in our community service division. And every time they go to a house, we actually are there to supervise them. They never go inside the person's home, never at all. We had one young lady, 98 years old, had not been in her backyard in 7 years because it just wasn't clean. So we went back there, and the good news is our community service workers enjoyed doing it. We went back there and cleaned out that backyard, and she was just really happy. Could you imagine not going in your backyard in 7 years? And so then we had everybody still laughing about the bamboo yard that we had. Now, that was a task. We actually pulled in everybody, DPD, Code, Concord, everybody had to come in and help us with that. 10 years of bamboo growing in a senior citizen backyard, and she was getting code violations for it. So we went back there and said, okay, we're gonna take it. It took us a week, but we was able to get all that bamboo out of her backyard. Those are some of the things that we do. And not only just taking the community court defenders out to do the community service, we provide all the supplies, we provide everything they need. In addition to that, we also give them a hot meal. If they work 8 hours for that day, we provide a hot lunch. So now guess what we're doing? We're helping them, we're helping our constituents, we're helping our senior adults and disabled. But in addition to that, we're also providing for the local vendors too in the community, because that's who we actually go and get the meals from. And that's paid for, again, by another grant that we have secured. In addition to that, if they're veterans, or if they have a drug addiction or mental health problem, we have 2 specialty courts that are also financed. One is by SAMHSA, another one is by BJA and the Texas Veteran Commission. So if you're a veteran, we actually pay bills for veterans too. We pay your rent, your utilities, and we help you find housing as well. So we'll transfer you to the Veterans Court. And so that way you can get all the services that you need being a veteran. In addition to that, if you're in drug court, say you have a dual diagnosis, if it's mental health and you're on drugs, we have a drug court and we pay for the treatment through our SAMHSA grant. So again, we are here to we take a holistic approach. We want to help the entire person. If we can't help you directly, indirectly, we will get you to the services that we need. And I just have to say, we have the best with the Dallas Housing Unit. We have the best with Code, with DPD, all of those, the social service providers. So if we can't do it, and we have the world's greatest partners. We have a career closet, we have a food bank. So basically, whatever that need is, if we can't help you directly, indirectly, and the way the Dallas police officers and code officers tell each one of our defenders, this is the court you want to go to. And in closing, and one thing we do different in community court is that we keep food in community court. Unlike, and the judge would tell you, unlike most courts, you don't have food in a court. But we understand that a lot of our defendants are homeless. A lot of them are either coming off a high or trying to get to a high. So it works twofold. For safety reasons, we will always get permission from the judge that we can serve them, minor snacks, and we can actually serve them coffee, soft drinks, or what have you. And usually I'm out trying to give them whatever they need. And it was too funny. One of the guys from the court said, I've been to court and I've seen a lot of things. He said, but I've never seen a waitress in a court. And so those are the things that we do. First of all, we're going to treat you with respect. Everybody's Mr. and Mrs. No matter what you look like, who you are addressed as Mr. and Mrs. And we want you to know, unlike other courts, this is a court here to help you, not to punish you, but to help you. That's what community court is about.
Thank you, Ms. Gibson. I appreciate that. And before we move on to the panel discussion and allowing you folks to kind of engage with each other, I wanted to ask you, Ms. Gibson, can you tell us a little bit about the mentor court designation that the Dallas community courts have, and what does it mean, and what does it mean to mentor a court, or the designation?
Okay. The Center for Court Innovation and BJA started a program, excuse me, you guys, started a community court. Sorry about that. Started a community court. And what it did was they were selecting courts to be mentor courts. Well, they started 14 years ago. And for 14 years, South Dallas Community Court has been a mentor court. Now, being a mentor court means that you have different people that are trying to start a court come and look at your model. And so far, we have had people from Canada, we have had people from Australia, we've had people from Africa, Detroit, Atlanta, Fort Worth. I'm probably forgetting some, but they come to look at the concept of what is a community court. And so once they come down, they actually spend anywhere from 2 to 3 days with us to actually see a court in session. They go out and see community service in progress. In addition to that, we have a copy of our policy and procedure manual that we will give everyone. We have a copy of the job descriptions that we give them. And we just let them know how to start a community court. And that's one of the things that you do when you're a mentor court, is that you have things in place that will show them, here's the process and how to get started. Now, IT support comes from the Center for Court Innovation in New York, but we actually have them to come and just watch us and see what we're doing. And so those are some of the things of being a mentor court, is that you help other courts get prepared and actually establish a community court in their district. But you also help them. One of the key things that we help them with is how to get the community involved, how to get them to buy into the concept of what is a community court. Because think about it now, when most people think court, they think criminals. They think this can't be anything that's going to help their community. So we actually teach them, and we have our community partners come in and explain to them what it was that we did. And one of the things that we did before starting a community court, we went to the community. And why did we go to the community first? Because we wanted to answer their questions, but we also wanted to explain to them that we're not coming here to bring crime into the city. We're not coming here to punish anybody. We're coming here so that we can make a difference in this community and then help the people that need the help. So those are some of the things that we explain to the community. And you have to get community buy-in. You have to. And so those are some of the processes that we go through in helping people understand what is a community court and why is it important and why should it be here in the community. Number one, is also convenient. It doesn't cost you anything to park at any of our community court. Parking the street. It's very accessible. It's on the bus line. So we made that convenience. In addition to that, we provide bus tokens if you need to get to and from the court and what have you. We provide social service needs. We provide whatever the need is, we have that help. So those are some of the things that we tell the community, that if that person works with the court, I promise you they're going to leave you a better person than they were when they came in. So those are some of the things that we explain before actually just telling people, we put a court in your community and that's it. We also had to buy in with the Dallas Police Department and with code, because without them, we couldn't do it.
Thank you, Ms. Gibson. I appreciate that response. And I will now I'll give the opportunity to Councilman and John to ask your questions of Ms. Gibson. Also, if John, if anything, or Ms. Gibson, anything they want to ask to the Councilwoman, and vice versa. I will take in some questions from the audience in a bit as well.
I did have a question, Dianne, in terms of how it got started. That process of getting from not having a court to having a court must have included several different steps. You explained one of them was getting community buy-in, but before that, there must have been some other steps taken to get to that level. So could you kind of?
The first step was trying to get the mayor and the city council to buy into it. And so the previous city attorney took a group of the city council people to the Center for Court Innovation. And so they were able to get a chance to look at the Manhattan Downtown Community Court and see that whole concept. So once we got them to buy into that, then we had to find the funding. So that's where CDBG came in. And so the council agreed to actually fund at that time one community court. That was the South Dallas Community Court. So once we went through first getting a model, which was the Center for Court Innovation, getting city council to buy into it by actually taking them to New York so they can see what is a community court and how it got started downtown Manhattan, then finding the funding, then finding the location. And what better place to put a community court than at the Martin Luther King Community Center, where there's already an array of services there. So the community court was all about what Dr. King talked about. And so that was the whole concept. And then buying into the community, then writing the job description. Now, believe it or not, the final one was DPD, our Dallas Police Department, and then actually getting them to buy into it, because naturally at first they thought, oh, well, you're not punishing them anymore. Yes, we are. We're still doing the punishment phase, but we're trying to help them first before you get to the punishment phase. And so once we sold it to them, then we sold it to Code. We then had to come back and create new citations, because the Class C Municipal Court downtown at 2014 Main Street uses green citations. And so we didn't want to confuse the DPD or the code officers. So we had to come up with some new citations, because again, ours was not traffic violation, but it was more or less quality of life crimes. And so we created the citations that's like a burnt orange, and we call them the V citation. So when you get that citation, you know that's a community court citation. In addition to that, we had to make sure they understood the green citation, you have 21 days to act on that. But on the V citation, at the time they're given the citation, we had to make sure they understood that you have to give them their court date when you give them the citation. We have a 9 o'clock docket and a 1 o'clock docket. It doesn't matter how many you write for 9 or how many you write for 1. To make it even easier, we put calendars inside the citation book. So then that way the officer could actually look at the calendar date, give them the information, and the address of the community court is on the front of the citation, also on the back of the citation. So we tried to do everything we could to make this process and this transition as simple and easy as possible. And as I said, June 24th will be 18 years. And so I guess we did it.
Well, that's wonderful. I had one other question about staffing. With regard to the prosecution and the judge, do these positions rotate among the different judges, among the different prosecutors, or do you have assigned judges and prosecutors that work within the court?
We have assigned judges and prosecutors. Again, I work for the city attorney's office, and within the city attorney's office, we have assistant city attorneys. I guess about 97 assistant city attorneys. And so then we also have a group called the community prosecutors. These are assistant city attorneys that just work in the community, and they deal, Councilwoman, with a lot of your code violations and the rehab and housing and what have you. They're in the community doing that. And so, and as a part of that, we have 5 community courts. So 3 of those prosecutors are assigned to community court. And so they each have a court that they are assigned to within that pool of attorneys that actually work in the city attorney's office. Now we have a municipal court that also have a group of prosecutors in the event, let's say hypothetically, all three are out that day, then we can pull from that pool as well to actually help us in community court. The judges, we have 12 municipal judges, and then we have associate judges. So we actually have 4 judges that's assigned to each community court, because we have 5 community courts, but we have the specialty courts. So we have judges assigned to those courts. And a lot of times, like Monday, if we had been at work, we have 3 courts in session. We have a Northeast Court, South Oak Cliff, and our Veterans Court. And so one judge is assigned to the South Oak Cliff and the Veterans Court, but then we have another judge that's assigned to the Northeast. So we have assigned judges and assigned prosecutors, but thanks to our departments, we also have backup. And I forgot the clerk's office. The clerk's office does not come under the city attorney's office. So we have court and detention services where we pull our clerks from, but they're housed full-time in each community court.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Great, thank you, Dianne. For my community, a $200 code compliant citation could potentially mean not paying your light, your water, purchasing groceries, and or purchasing medication. And without paying your light or water, those are 2 code compliance violations if your water and light are shut off. And those 2 violations lead to notices to vacate. Can you tell us a little bit about how the community court can promote housing stability?
Well, the way we promote housing stability is we work closely with Jessica Gallenshaw as our housing coordinator, and she works in that department. So we have a good relationship with them if that is the case. But in the scenario you just gave us, number one, we work closely with a program at the Dallas County called the CAP program. And that acronym is the Comprehensive Energy Assistance Program. So you don't have to not pay that bill. We can actually help you with that by referring you to the CAP program. In addition to that, when you come to community court, unless you just actually say that's what you want to do is pay the fine and court costs, you can do community service in lieu of fine and court costs. But in the interim, whatever that code violation is, we can actually refer you if it's in housing, because we have a housing repair program, if that's something we can do, or it may be something community service can do. Just this Friday, we had the opportunity to walk the neighborhood with a code officer, DPD, and with community service. So that way we can see some of the things that we can do, that we can refer to other housing agencies that can help you, or we can get community service workers out there. If it's just like tearing down a shed or something, we can do that. And it's at no cost to that citizen. In addition to that, if it's overgrown vegetation, we can do that. If it's just cutting your grass, we can do that. Again, like I said, if it's painting your house, we can also do that. And just this Friday, we had a young lady that needed a roof repair. Well, we actually worked with the Dallas Black contractors this weekend, so they're going to help her. It's just building strong partnerships so that this way you don't add a financial burden. We can't do it directly, but we can get in the community and get the services they need. So we actually have a good relationship with all of our contractors and all of the Black contractors, the Hispanic contractors. We have a good relationship with them to try and help our senior citizens. In addition to that, and you know, anything in government takes time. We have the Dallas Tomorrow Fund that we can help you with. The city of Dallas has a housing program. It's not going to happen overnight, because naturally it's a process. And so we explain that to them. But the good news is that we talk to code, we talk to our DPD, we talk to them to let them know Ms. Snuffy Smith is working with community court. She's actually in community court, and we are working to resolve the issue.
Great, thank you, Diana.
Thank you.
Diana, one last question before. In terms of the population that you're seeing come to court on housing cases, does that skew to older persons? Is it pretty mixed? How do you have any data on that? In terms of, I
don't have the data in front of me, but just from looking in the court, it's mostly our elderly senior citizens.
Thank you.
Ms. Gibson, I had a question to follow up. I think it was Councilwoman Castillo's question, dealing with the citation and community service. When it comes to this community service, and we're dealing with someone who is very elderly, what is the procedure? Because sometimes, $200 infraction, or having to do yard work somewhere is also just it's not an option for some of our older adults. What happens in those cases?
And as I said earlier, everything is done in community court by assessment. And so it's not just that you came in and you said you wanted to do community service. You still have to have an assessment done by that community service coordinator. That assessment is going to tell us whether or not this is someone that can go out and do community service. And if they can't, then we have options. So one of the things we can recommend, so write us a letter. The prosecutor may say, do an essay. So give us an essay as to tell us, why you can't do community service, or why not put trash out earlier than it's supposed to be. It all depends on the subject that prosecutor picked. Now, if that is the case, that still waives your fine and court costs if the judge accepts it. In addition to that, if you're not able to go out and do community service, then you stay in the office. A lot of times we have them stuff in envelopes. Post-pandemic, we used to have them sitting with some of our senior citizens and helping them. We also participate in cleaning out at the SPCA, helping with the animals and cleaning that out or what have you. But we have alternatives. So we're not going to force you to go out and do community service. Also, if it's inclement weather, we have indoor projects that we can do. We work closely with Cornerstone, who feed the homeless. So we may go down and clean out the building. That's where our career closet is. We may go and organize the career closet. Or we may just do inventory with all of our equipment, but there are actually different things that you can do. And if all else fails, and this person we know just cannot do community service, we have to write that up, document it, make that recommendation back to the prosecutor saying, we don't have anything. We are unable to find anything for this person to do because, and we have to explain why this person can't do anything in community service. And we're asking the court to waive that fine and court costs. And that's what we give to the prosecutor, who then makes that recommendation to the judge based on our findings.
Councilwoman or Judge Ross, do you have any questions that you would like me to, or would you like to ask her, Ms. Gibson, any questions before I move to our community questions?
I think we touched on the questions. Thank you.
Okay, great. So we have a question here asking about the location or the accessibility of the caseworkers. They want to know how how hard is it for someone that is in court to find the caseworkers? Are they on site, or do they have to go to a, for here, if we went if there was a community court and they had to go to a caseworker downtown, that would be not the most convenient thing.
Yeah, our cliche here at community court is we are one-stop shop. And so the reason why we say that, because in every community court, there's a security, clerk, social service worker, community service worker, prosecutor, judge, and a bailiff. And that's in all 5 courts. And so as soon as you talk to everybody's in the same court, in separate office, but we're in the same courtroom. And so once you talk with the clerk, you go to the prosecutor. Once you leave the prosecutor, you go back to the social service coordinator. Once you leave the social service coordinator, you go back to the prosecutor, from there to the judge, from the judge to the community service coordinator. You do a whole gamut. So we actually have everything inside the court. Now, if there's a service that we don't provide in the court, then we have our partners that we give you a referral to.
Okay. We have another question here, and I guess, I believe you mentioned all the community courts are within the city of Dallas.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess the question here is there any, would this be able to happen in the county, county of Dallas, or outside of city limits, or is this exclusive to communities within the city?
This is exclusive to the city of Dallas, but the greater news is that we have a working rapport with all of our justices of the peace that do service Dallas County. We actually meet on a quarterly basis so that we can see how we can help one another. And that's just say if Snuffy came to this community court, but we found out that Snuffy had some citations in Judge Jones' court. And if that is the case, guess what? That prosecutor will then call the court and we have a designated person to talk to. And sometimes a lot of our JPs will say, well, you know what, if they're doing community service already in community court, why don't we just run that concurrent? And that's what happens when you build partnerships, when you collaborate. So technically, Dallas County does not have community courts, but our community courts has an excellent working rapport with their justice of the peace, which is like a higher level of a community court. And so we actually have an excellent working rapport with them. Like now during all of this pandemic, where everybody's behind in their rent and people are being evicted, we actually have a working relationship with them where housing actually have people there inside those JP courts that if you're coming in there and you were affected by COVID, you're facing eviction, you can actually talk with a representative right there in the court. And so they don't have community courts, but we have an excellent rapport with the JP courts.
And I think this might be our last community question, but what kind of, and you said community courts in Dallas have been around now for 17 years. So if the change kind of a big, a big question mark on how it's changed, but I guess the question is, what kind of changes do you see in a community after, a community court is put into place? Or what kind of visual changes has been seen in the community?
Visual changes that we're actually doing a lot better on litter control. One of the other changes is that we're now trying to, before the pandemic, houses that needed painting, we're now going out and painting those. So it's actually beautification in that neighborhood. We also did sidewalk where we actually did the putting the addresses that had faded out on people's curb. We actually installed that. A lot of graffiti that was out throughout the community. We've actually did painting and getting a lot of the graffiti out of the community. I'm getting tongue-tied here. Graffiti cleaned out of the community. But most of all, we're giving people a sense of worth. We're giving them a sense of hope. And people that thought they couldn't do better are doing better. One of our recent stories is a young lady sent us the picture of her before and after 30 years of being on drugs. Now she's actually working. She's fully employed, homeowner. She has her kids back. Another young lady came through the court and everything. She's back. She's self-sufficient. She's actually working at one of our treatment centers now, and she was able to get her kids back. Another young lady had never had driver's license before in her life, 55 years old. We were able to help her now get her driver's license. So you're able to give people a sense of worth and helping them to feel self-sufficient, to know that it's somebody working on the inside to help them. We've been able to get people's Social Security back started. And I have to say this, we work closely with DA Crusoe's office, who's our district attorney here in the city of Dallas. And one thing we do is every year we do an expunction clinic. And it is just phenomenal. This year, well, it was 2021, December, we actually was able to get 800 people at no cost, to get their record expunged, all because of a partnership with the city attorney, Chris Queso, with our DA, John Crusoe, and with our law schools, UNT, with Cheryl Watley and all that group. We all pulled together, Felicia Petrie, our county clerk, we all pulled together to help people get them a new start. So just year 2021, and that was our 5th year. From year 2021, we were able to get 800 people now that don't have to say, I don't have to check the block. Why? Because we were able to get their record expunged at no cost to them. And so those are the things that we're doing. That's just some of them that we're doing to make a difference in the communities we serve.
Thank you. And so as we near the end of our event, I just want to offer our guests the opportunity to share some closing remarks. If I was going to start with Ms. Gibson, but maybe I should give you a break, because I know we're we've got you answering all our questions. Councilwoman, would you like to share some closing remarks?
Absolutely. Thank you, AARP, for offering the opportunity and space to facilitate this very important conversation. As San Antonio takes a step back and recalibrates to ensure that we create a city that allows folks to age in place if they choose to. It's great to take a step back and look to different models throughout the state that are working to mitigate community displacement and are offering solutions to folks who may not have the funds necessary to address that code compliance violation. So I want to thank John and Dianne for this important conversation. And I'm ready to get back with my colleagues and share this very great information, and to know, right, that there are different models out there that we can be operating in, and how we do have an opportunity to have a community care system with code enforcement and with our court system. So thank y'all for facilitating this very important conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Ms. Gibson, would you like to continue?
Okay. First of all, thank you for the opportunity. Judge Vasquez, thank you so much. And Judge Ortiz said hi. And so thank you all, AARP and Councilwoman. It was a joy just meeting you. I hope to see you in person one day. But you all, community court is a wonderful concept. And again, it started from the Center for Court Innovation in New York, but it's not perfect, but at least we're making a difference. But the one most important thing is building a rapport and building a sense of trust with the community, number one, with law enforcement, with code, and with other various departments, because we can't do this by ourselves. We are connected to the faith organizations, to nonprofits. We had to find funding to help them get something as simple as state issued ID. And you should see them. It's a big difference, because all they had was that get out of jail ID. You should see them when they get a state issued ID. And so the one thing the caseworkers have to keep is a record of all of that. Simple things that we take for granted, like whenever they get ready for graduation, when they have completed all the conditions of their probation, I tell them my theme song is I'm not too proud to beg. And so I always go around telling people, when you go to conventions, give me your toiletries, give me the little bags that you don't want, because guess what? Those bags to us may be just another convention bag, but to those homeless individuals or to some of the people that's coming to our court, that's a Samsonite Louis Vuitton luggage piece. And they carry it like that too. And you should see them. We make a big deal when they complete their, and a lot of times they tell us, this is the first time in life I ever completed anything. We make a big deal out of it. We give them a certificate of completion. We clap, we give them gifts. We take pictures with them and the judge and the prosecutor. This is a major milestone in their life. So we make a big deal out of it. And the same thing in our drug courts. If they have to go through different levels, each time they go to a higher level, we have a gift for them. We have incentives that we give them to say, keep going, keep going. And so we just do a good job of letting people know we care. That's the most important thing, and letting them know that we are here for you. We are here to advocate on your behalf. And those are some of the things. We're not perfect by no means. We're still learning. But I have to say this again on behalf of the mayor and the city council and the city attorney, Chris Queso. We couldn't do this without their support. And so thank you to our DA, Judd Crusoe, too, who also is helping us. But you guys, it's all about partnership. It is all about partnership, collaboration, working together to make a difference in the community you serve. And Judge, you know, if they don't follow all the rules and regulations, then we have to go to the punishment phase. But it's never without us doing our due diligence first.
Thank you, Ms. Gibson. We appreciate that. Judge Vasquez.
Yes, thank you. First off, Councilmember Castillo, Ms. Gibson, thank you very much for being a part of this panel. AARP appreciates the work that you're doing and understands that it's so critical, so important to our older Americans to be able to age in place, to be able to live their lives out comfortably and not face repercussions because of things they really have a difficulty trying to address. And as a judge, when I dealt with cases, I tried to make sure that I was careful and treated people thoughtfully. And one of the greatest things that I always appreciated was somebody would approach me outside of court and say, thank you for dealing with them and working with them to make sure that they didn't wind up in a spiral downward. Because so many of these cases, if they're handled incorrectly, handled without care for that individual, can result in a downward spiral that one thing leads to another. And before you know it, that person is never going to get out of that hole. So what you're doing in Dallas sounds wonderful. It's an opportunity for other cities here in Texas, San Antonio in particular, I hope, to study and learn from that and be able to develop a system that works for us and will benefit all of our citizens, all of our people, so that they get resources and help that they need when they need it and avoid that situation. But it does take a team. As I think you explained very well, Ms. Gibson, community has to support it, they have to understand it, but also all the other players, the police, the county, the city, all of those departments in code violations, they all have to be willing to understand and accept a change from where we are presently to where we want to be. But if they can see that there's hope in the future for a big change like what you demonstrated there in Dallas, then maybe we can move forward with this and make that change that we need to make. But I want to thank you so much for the enlightening. There were things you talked about that I was not aware of, and that's wonderful. I really, really appreciate that. And on behalf of ARP, thank you so much for the work you've done. Councilor, thank you so much for being here and being a part of the discussion and being interested enough to participate.
Thank you, John. Once again, AARP thanks our guests, Judge John Vasquez, Councilwoman Terry Castillo, and Ms. Dianne Gibson for joining us for this conversation. For more from AARP in San Antonio, visit aarp.org/San Antonio or visit our AARP Texas Facebook page. For information about housing and utility assistance programs in San Antonio and to reach your San Antonio City Council person, you can call the City of San Antonio at 311. That's 311. Thank you, and until next time.
Thank you.